she wants more from life, or she's feeling a little unfulfilled. Also, according to Freud, and according to societal norms at the time, would it be normal for a woman to have any kind of sexual intercourse outside of wedlock? No. Problematic in society? What would she be sort of labeled? An adulterer, or if she were unmarried? What's a really not nice thing to call someone? Yeah. And it's, you know, expected to be maybe a prostitute, behave like a prostitute, a woman of ill repute, right? Something like that. Freud thinks that, however, all women, all people really, are really driven by these sexual desires, these overt sexual desires, and that part of the problem that causes any kind of conflict or personality issue or mental illness or any of this hysteria is from some of these repressed sexual desires. So Freud thinks that's where a lot of this stuff is coming from. That's what we're sort of going to get into. So according to Freud, he really thinks that the root of everything, any of this hysteria, any problem we have, comes from some sort of conflict we have, some sort of issue that we've repressed into our unconscious. And he thinks that our unconscious makes up the bulk of our existence. So this is, just so you know, an iceberg. That's my drawing of an iceberg. This is the ocean, the waves. This little bit that you can see, the tip of the iceberg, is your, you guys are going to love my artwork all throughout class, your conscious experience. And all this that you can't see hidden under the water is your unconscious. All right, we talked a little bit about conscious experience last time, because we talked about focusing on that conscious experience with fun. What is your conscious versus unconscious experience again? Are we aware of our unconscious, really? No. Okay. We're only aware of our unconscious process. So according to Freud, most of what's going on is happening in this chunk of our psyche that we are unaware of. So he thinks that we've got a lot of unresolved issues and conflicts that are happening in that unconscious that are causing any multitude of problems that we're having now. So he thinks that we need to get at that unconscious, access those problems, those conflicts, sort of like ripping off a Band-Aid, right? Get access to them in order to address and heal them. Now, if we can't access our unconscious just by trying, which we know we can't do, right? Freud's come up with a couple ways that we're going to gain access to our unconscious thoughts, wishes, desires, conflicts, memories, all that sort of stuff. The first thing that he thinks of, or one of the ways he uses, is something called free association. Anybody know what free association is? It's when I say a word, or he says a word, or someone says a word, and you tell me the first thing that comes to mind. Okay, if I say the word apple, tell me the first thing that comes to mind. Okay, so everybody's got something that comes to mind, right? If I say the word Freud, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Okay. If I say the word dog, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Okay, so when we talk about these things and we use sort of common, innocuous words, it's not too difficult to sort of spit things out, right? Did anybody, which would be normal, have like even a fraction of a second pause before you said what it was that came to mind? Yeah. And where does that come from?
Just thinking of the word?
Just thinking of the word. And then I think, is that the first word that comes to mind? Right? Like, did I think of something else? Why did I think of that word? And then, to some extent, should I be shouting this word out in class in front of a bunch of strangers, right? So it's not so hard when I say apple and someone says banana, but is Freud looking at the innocent he trying to get at more interesting parts of your unconscious? The interesting parts, right? He doesn't really care what you think about. He may care what you think about when he says banana, but he does not really care what you think about when he says apple. So we all have some sort of internal filter, most of us anyway, right? Some people have a better filter and some people have a less strong filter. Anybody have some friends that have maybe not a great filter?
Yeah.
Okay, so yes?
Is there a lot more unconscious thoughts that you have rather than conscious thoughts? Like, is it really like that, the way you have it drawn on the iceberg?
Well, we don't know. Scientifically, we couldn't say. Because we can't tell you or see what's in our unconscious, we can't actually measure it. So this is Freud's theory. There's got to be, well, we know that we've got memories stored, right? There's memory and knowledge and information that you have somewhere in your brain that you don't have constant conscious access to. That we know, right? Is it this kind of model? Is it just stored in a frontal lobe in a computer model sort of way, which we'll talk about, the possibility of? We don't know that. Can't prove any of it. So this is what Freud thinks, and we're going to use our scientific brains to sort of try to analyze what we think of what Freud thinks. What do you think?
About I don't know. I was just curious because how I didn't know that if you knew that it was like that at one time.
I know that there's more to our brains than our conscious experience. Otherwise, we would be a person that had no memory, no ability to form memory, right? It would only be in the present all the time. I don't know if it's what Freud thinks. I don't necessarily personally agree with everything that Freud says. I think most women don't probably agree personally with everything Freud says, and maybe men are not, but.
Do you think memories like fade away, like to where you'll never be able to remember it again, or do you think it's always there?
That's a great question, and one that we're going to spend weeks talking about. I'll let you know. Nobody can prove that either, because we can't prove if they're gone or if we just can't access them. It's called encoding and retrieval. I think memories are there, we can't access them, personally, that they don't fade away. But okay, so assuming, as what Freud thinks, that there is this piece to our unconscious, which there's at least something to. What are some of the issues with free association? So we know we've got a filter, so that's an issue, right? And whether you do it consciously or not, right? Whether you consciously stop yourself from saying the first thing that comes to mind, or you unconsciously just sort of do it out of habit or a protective instinct, that doesn't always work. So he also has a different second way of trying to get at some of our unconscious thoughts. What is something that we all do every night, even if we don't necessarily remember? Dream. Do you know that you all dream even if you don't remember it?
Yep.
Okay. So what affects whether or not you remember it is what phase of your sleep cycle you wake up during. So sometimes you wake up during different phases, so you might remember it or not. We'll talk about that too. So Freud is sort of big on dream analysis as a way to get to our unconscious thoughts as well. So we've all at least had some dreams that we remember, right? What do they usually seem like they make a lot of sense?
How come sometimes you have dreams that like repeat?
Well, Freud would say that you have an unresolved issue. That the dream is repeating itself because whatever it is that it's trying to get at or trying to tell you or trying to work on has not been resolved or is a continuing problem. Would that answer work for you?
I mean, yeah, do you think that's why?
Do I think that's why? I think it depends on the dream. I think that although there are things like anxiety dreams that are fairly self-evident, that the dreams are also possibly just a combination and jumble of information that you have in your brain that's being processed and sort of thrown together. So if there are consistent thoughts or experiences or concerns that you're having over and over, it would make sense that you had a recurring dream. I wouldn't necessarily say that it's, because you've got an unresolved sexual conflict or some other conflict or something like that.
What about loop dreaming?
What's that?
Loop dreaming?
What about it?
What would you say about that? Being able to control your dreams?
Freud doesn't think you can really control your unconscious.
Uh-huh.
So I guess it would be like a false sense of control.
Okay.
So, Freud is interested in analyzing our dreams. So we're talking about, so when we're talking about our dreams, if someone said, "What did you dream last night?" you would tell them something, right? You would tell them the content of your actual dream. My most recent dream that I can remember is, you guys know like the the Buddhist temple, the Vietnamese temple on Gordon Road that's there? I had a dream that I went there, I went in, I was speaking to one of the monks inside about an upcoming fundraiser and doing some like logistical planning, like, food and tables and things like that. I don't remember what the fundraiser was for or why I was there or anything like that, but that was the content that I could remember of my dream. That was the manifest content. What does manifest mean? Versus latent, maybe.
Like the intended function?
Yeah, it's like the intended function. It's what you can see, right? It's the obvious content. So the manifest content of your dream is when you tell somebody or you write in your dream journal, "This is what I dreamt last night," whatever crazy or not crazy dream it seemed to be. Now, a lot of us, or some of us, might be interested in what that manifest content meant, right? So this is what I dreamt. What did it mean? Why did I dream about being at this fundraiser at this Buddhist temple and talking to this guy? That would be the latent content. Latent content would be the hidden content. So maybe the meaning of what we dreamt.
So manifest was what again?
What's that?
What was the manifest again?
The obvious content of the dream, like what happened in the dream, not what the dream meant. Manifest would be what happened, latent would be what did it mean. Are people familiar with the idea of a common dream, or at least a commonly described dream, being sort of naked in front of a classroom of people? Has anybody heard that before? What is that supposed to mean? Generally.
Just worried about embarrassing yourself?
It's an anxiety dream, right? So you've got some anxiety-producing event possibly coming up, and you're worried about the event or worried about embarrassing yourself in front of it, things like that. So that would be, so actually standing naked in front of the classroom would be the manifest, and the latent content would be you're anxious about something or worried about something.
What about getting eaten by a shark?
Well, when you get into
Repeatedly, all the time.
how does it make you feel?
Like it's actually happening.
Like physically,
Yeah, physically.
so you feel physical pain?
Yep.
Do you feel emotional
Yep.
fear and terror?
Yep.
And do you actually die in the dream?
Sometimes
Okay, and how do you know you're dead?
I look down at myself.
You look down at yourself. There are different aspects to that in a million different ways. There's also a lot of different schools of thought on dream interpretation, right? Like Freud doesn't have the only, he doesn't corner the market on what he thinks things mean. He would probably say that he feels like you feel that you're out of control in some area of your life. The shark represents the area of life that you're out of control in. So the more it consumes you, so to speak, the more control you're losing. And that, you know, in the dreams or during the times of your life that you actually die and you can see and look down on yourself, you have been consumed by this, whatever it is that's happening. Maybe during other times when you're not fully eaten, you're fighting back a little bit more. That would probably be a basic interpretation of that, like a loss of control sort of thing. Anybody else want a quick overview?
Well, I'm wondering, do all dreams have meanings? Because you mentioned earlier that like sometimes it's just our brain possibly throwing around thoughts or memories.
I mentioned that I think that, right? Freud thinks all dreams have meanings. So it's what you think. So right now we're talking about what Freud thinks. Does Freud think all dreams have meaning? Yes, absolutely. I don't necessarily think that. Okay. So we know that Freud thinks that our unconscious powers who we are, right? And we know a couple ways that he uses to get at it. And the reason that we're interested in all this is because it sort of affects everything about who we are and how we develop and our personality development, how we turn into people, and how that shapes how we have our, all our interactions and what happens to us in life. So Freud thinks that we've got three major building blocks of our personality. Three major areas in which we develop that will shape how we have all our interactions in life and how, we deal with things, how we are who we are. And those three building blocks start developing right at birth and develop right through adolescence and into adulthood. So the three big parts of our personality. And those are the id, superego, and the ego. So these are three distinct parts of all humans' psyche, the three parts that make up who we are. So, let's start with the id. The id is the part of us, the part of our brain that Freud says is the unconscious area where we're striving to satisfy all our sort of base needs. So the id is the thing that says, I want, I want, I want. And it wants everything that it wants, and it wants it right now. All about instant gratification. Okay, working on this idea of sort of a pleasure principle. If it's something that you want and something that you think feels good, then you're going to take it. So that's pleasure principle. That's a little bit of an aggressive thing, right? I want this, I want it now, I'm taking it. Be like taking candy from a baby.
Selfishness.
Selfishness. So what are some base drives that humans might have?
Money.
Baser than money.
Desire.
Desire, physical desire,
Lust.
hunger, lust. Okay, so food, sex, aggression in terms of what it takes to get those things when it wants it. There's no putting the id off. Okay, it could be like a toddler having a tantrum because they want M&Ms and they want them right now, and they don't care that they're in public and screaming, crying on the floor and making a scene and wanting those M&Ms right now, right? That's your id. If you can think about sort of the metaphor of like a little angel and a little devil on your shoulder, the id's going to be that devil saying, take that, I want that, I need that, okay? That's what the id does. Is that going to be a sort of sustainable personality for an adult human functioning in the world? Probably not, right? So, in addition to the id, we also develop its sort of alter ego or superego. So our superego is at the other end of the spectrum of the id. So if we're at the other end of the spectrum, the complete opposite, what is the superego going to look like? What's it going to say?
Be more caring.
Yep, but it's not that nice about it.
It's what we strive to be.
But less nice. The superego is very much like finger pointing and you shouldn't do this, that's bad, that's wrong, right?
Judgmental.
It's very judgmental. The id wouldn't judge you at all, and the superego will judge the heck out of you. So superego is I guess the angel on your shoulder saying, don't do this, don't do that, that's wrong, right? You shouldn't do this. So if you consist, if you're made up of just an ego and a superego, what are you going to be like? Very extreme, bipolar, sort of crazy, right? Bouncing back and forth between the two. Is that going to be a sustainable way of existing? Probably not so much, right? So if you've only got this angel yelling at you and this devil yelling at you, and they're yelling opposite things, I want to have that chocolate cake. You can't have that. That's bad. That's wrong. You can't take that, right? Then constantly you're going to be pulled back and forth. Not a great way for your psyche to be. So what do we need to have? We need our ego. We need something to balance us in the middle. Now, if I just say to you the word ego, does it have a positive or sort of negative connotation normally? What do you think of when I say, or if I said someone has an ego or a big ego, what do you think of? Kanye West. You think of a specific person, arrogant, right? Cocky, that sort of thing. When we think about it in terms of personality development, certainly the way it's intended here, an ego is a good thing. It's a healthy, you can develop a healthy ego, sort of a healthy sense of self, a healthy self-esteem, a healthy, balanced personality, okay? So in this sense, your ego is your good thing. If you're thinking of like, if you watch the presidential debates, right? We've got Clinton and we've got Trump, and then who's the ego going to be? Well, the moderator, right? Anderson Cooper or whoever it happened to be during specific debates. So your ego is going to be the guy in the middle saying, okay. So what kinds of things, every decision that we make, every part of our personality, according to Freud, is made up of how strong our id, ego, and superego are. So what's a decision that each of us makes on a daily basis?
Get up and go to school.
To get up and go to school or work, right? Okay, so what to have for lunch? Okay, so we can do both of those. So get up and go to school. So it's Monday morning, it's a little cold, a little drizzly, and your bed is like warm and comfortable, right? So what do you kind of not want to do? Get up and go to school or work, right? So what is your id going to say? Stay home, right? What's wrong with it? You don't need to go to school. It's fine. What is your superego going to say? It's wrong. You got to go to school. You're going to miss everything. You're so stupid. You're lazy. Why would you even think of not going to school? Like, what kind of person are you? They're not just going to say, you should get up and go to school. Superego is not nice to you. Okay, that's something I want to sort of. Superego is mean and strict and very finger pointing. What is your ego hopefully going to say or figure out?
You should probably go.
Justification.
Okay.
Reason.
that we could, I mean, there's multiple resolutions to this conflict. What are some things the ego could say?
Go to school late.
What's that?
Go to school late.
Go to school late. Okay, it's cold and dark now, but you'll get to your second class. That's a compromise. That's something the ego could say. What else?
Go get some breakfast and then you might change your mind.
Get up,
Sure.
take a shower, whatever.
Yeah. Is it possible for the ego to say it's okay to stay home?
Yes.
Sure. Stay home. You haven't missed a class yet. You can get the notes from so-and-so, or the notes are going to be online,
More rational.
Yeah, it's hopefully, if you have a good ego, right, rational and developed and balanced, and can sort of help you work out a justification. And in the same way, we think about what we're going to eat, right? And this doesn't have to be, so everything isn't a right or wrong. It's not you should or shouldn't. That's what, the ego would like you to believe, but the truth is, in life, is it always right or wrong to go to school? No, sometimes you need to stay home, honestly, right? Sometimes you don't feel well, or you need a mental health day or whatever. Is it right or wrong what you're gonna have for lunch? I mean, you might tell yourself that, but like, is it a black and white answer? Like, does it have to be salad or McDonald's, or whatever it is? So there are lots of factors that come into play, but it's how we've internalized society's norms that we express those factors for ourselves. So let's do lunch. So what are some of the factors that can come into play when we're deciding what we're going to have for lunch?
Indecisiveness.
Certainly, right? I never know what I want to eat, but
What did you eat in the morning?
what'd you eat? Okay. Now, that's going to come into play in different ways for different people, right? For some people, it matters what they ate that morning because maybe they ate out and spent money, and they think, well, then I should make lunch at home. For some people, it matters what they ate for breakfast because of caloric or health reasons, right? I had a big breakfast, so I should have a lighter lunch, or vice versa, or something like that. For some people, it's purely a taste thing, right? I had, pancakes for breakfast, so I don't want something starchy for lunch. I don't know. Any number of, so there are different ways that even just what you have for breakfast comes into play depending on what? You, right? Depending on you. Some people could care less how many calories they had for breakfast versus how many calories they're having for lunch. Or if they bought out or made at home, or, these different factors that can come into play. So will somebody go through their lunch process for me? Like, how do you decide what you're gonna have for lunch? This was your example, I think, right?
Yeah, well, I pack my lunch, so it's mostly the same every day.
Okay.
Just the peanut butter and jelly because it's simple and basic. And if I were to pack with a sandwich with meat in it, it would probably be more work for me in the morning when I'm still tired, and I have to pull more stuff out the fridge. Maybe lettuce put on it, butter, mayonnaise, whatever. And then I go yogurt because it's healthy. Get your dairy in there. Animal crackers because maybe just to snack on during class, or it's filling. So I guess I do kind of think through the process.
Mhm.
And
Fairly rationally, it sounds like,
Yeah.
right? Now, on a day that you woke up super late or tired or were dragging, and you didn't have the energy to make lunch, what would your process be? Would you buy lunch or skip lunch, or?
probably buy it, but then it'd probably be from my school. So then I'd probably just choose they always have a bag lunch, so I'd probably choose the bag lunch over what's there because they don't have the best lunch.
Okay, so maybe a taste issue?
Yeah.
So is there any kind of internal debate or conversation that you have about which lunch to buy, or if you're gonna buy lunch from school, or if you're gonna go out to lunch or something like that? Yeah, a little bit of that, right? It sounds like in this area you do pretty well in terms of rationality. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's another thing I want you to consider. When we are developing in our id, ego, and superego, and in different areas of our lives, some of us are going to be have a stronger ego, say in some areas like food choices or nutrition or something, and maybe in other areas have a less developed ego. So maybe you're somebody that this is unlikely, but I can't. So you're someone that in your day-to-day life you're fairly well organized in terms of your time management. You get places on time and you get your to-do list checked off, and and that's not like a huge struggle for you. So you're not like this big procrastinator that's like this raging debate, right? Whereas some of us have that. It's like, I put things off. Oh, I don't want to write this paper. And then all of a sudden you have like time management issues and you're up all night and this and that. So say you're not like that. You're good. You're okay on time management. But in another area of life, like maybe nutrition, maybe you're constantly struggling with some sort of like health plan or yo-yo dieting or something like that, right? So it's every day it's a struggle over what to have for breakfast and how many calories did you have, and well, you had a healthy breakfast, so should you splurge a little on lunch, and right, this constant debate that's weighing back and forth for people. Or you have like terrible money management, you're always spending too much or whatever it is. So we're all going to develop differently in different areas too. So just because you have a really good, sort of a healthy ego in one area of your life doesn't mean that it's that good in another necessarily. Right? Though, as a general rule, the stronger your ego, the more it will sort of spread out, if that makes sense. Right? Okay. Okay, so those are our id egos and super egos. So those are our distinct categories that are developed throughout our lifetime. Now, Freud also has ideas on how those develop. And they start, I think, like I said, at birth. And he has what he calls the psychosexual stages of development. He's got 5 of them. Okay. So as we go through these stages of development and what happens during these stages and how we sort of come out of them will directly affects how well our id, superego, and ego develop. So these are the stages that we go through that affect this personality development. So the first stage starts at the beginning, at birth. So we'll call that 0 months. And it goes to about 18 months. For a newborn and a young infant, what's one of the first things a newborn needs to do? Eat, right? And how do they eat? They nurse. Okay. So everything is very focused on the mouth, on eating, on nutrition, on nursing. This is what Freud names the oral stage. Okay. Now, Freud calls these the psychosexual stages of development. Remember, Freud thinks everything is motivated by unconscious sexual sort of drives, even infancy. Okay? Unconscious. I'm not talking about, little weird children. This is just unconscious desires that he thinks people have. All right, so, and Freud, not me. So we're focused on the oral stage. So nursing is something that happens. What are some things that an infant would associate with nursing? Mother. Care. Comfort. Satiety, right? Probably some warmth. So different levels, security, smells, things like that. So there are things that are associated with nursing. Even if an infant, even if we're not talking about a mother nursing, but a caregiver, a bottle, things like that, they're going to have a lot of those same associations, right? So the sort of pleasure principle, the driving principle for this stage would be sucking, right? Nursing, and then later on chewing, biting, things like that. So things are focused on the mouth, hence the oral stage, right? Okay. All right. Second stage is going to be about 18 months to about 3 years or 36 months. What are early toddlers often learning during this stage?
Everyone.
Everything.
I'm going through that right now.
Okay.
Grab everything.
What's that?
Grab everything.
They want to grab everything.
The world's grown.
There's one correct answer, so I'm going to sort of lead us towards that a little bit, right? What's something that a kid needs to learn before they can sort of go to school, stop wearing diapers, and get out into the world? Potty training. Okay. So during this stage, Freud thinks that the source of interest, control, and pleasure is bladder and bowel control, or this potty training. And this is what he's going to call specifically the anal stage. Okay, so we are focused on potty training, learning that control, being able to get that control, some reciprocity from parents or caregivers, right? Reward system often in place there. Okay.
Gummy bears.
What's that? Gummy bears, M&Ms, potty cookies. That's what my nieces got. Things like that. Well, they were M&Ms. Okay. So the sense of sort of pleasure, though, and satisfaction during this stage is coming from the infant being, or the toddler being able to master these control issues, right? All right, next stage, which is from about 36 months or 3 years to around 6 years. During this stage, Freud thinks that the child is most interested in getting the most information from their discovery of their genitals and what they do and the function and the purpose. And this is called the phallic stage. Now, also during the phallic stage, Freud thinks that some groundwork is sort of laid in the unconscious mind for relationships and cross-gender relationships later in life. So when you're a little kid at this age, who are the men and women in your life that you have most contact with?
Parents.
Your parents, usually, right? Mother and father, usually? Okay. So Freud takes some ideas from some Greek mythology, and he comes up what he calls the Oedipus complex and the Electra complex. Oedipus is for boys, and Electra is for girls. Okay. Anybody know who Oedipus is, or Oedipus complex? Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
He's the guy who ends up like killing his father and sleeping with his mother.
Exactly. Right. So according to Greek mythology, there's a old king, and he has a son, and gets a prophecy or an oracle. And the oracle says that his son, the king's son, who happens to be Oedipus, will grow up to kill his father and marry his mother. Obviously, the king doesn't want this to happen, so he gets rid of the baby. I think he sends him to be killed, but maybe whoever can't kill an infant or something like that, so sends him away. So Oedipus ends up growing up, and at some point, 20, 25 years down the road, he is traveling, and his father, the king, is also traveling on the same road. Now, they don't know each other, they don't even know the other's existence, right? But there's some sort of altercation, and there's a fight, and Oedipus ends up killing the king. So he kills his father. So there's the first part of the prophecy coming true, right? So now the kingdom is kingless. So Oedipus goes and takes over as king, and he marries the widowed queen, and who's that?
His mother.
His mother. Okay, so without meaning to, he has killed his father and married his mother. Freud takes this idea, the story of Oedipus, and says that all boys have this unconscious desire to kill their fathers and marry their mothers. Now, what could that look like in reality, though? If you want to get rid of your father, and how many times has a little kid said to a parent, "I want to marry you," right? Because they don't really understand that yet, right? So what do they really want when they say, "I'd like to marry you"?
What I get from that is the child wants to move out of the house, be out of the control of the dad, and also wants to find a woman like his mother.
That's probably true, at a little bit later, but earlier on, it's really just you want to remove the competition, right? So that's that other sex, because you want mom. Mom gives you whatever she gives you from that relationship.
Mama's boy.
Mama's boy, right? Mom is nurturing, mom is this, mom is that. So who's your main competition? Dad, right? So that's kind of what's going. It's like an attention thing. Of course you want to marry your mom. Your mom's great. You know, most kids when they're 4 thinks mom is like the greatest woman in the world. And then the Electra complex then would say that it's a girl, so she would want to kill mom, get mom out of the way, and marry dad. Daddy's girl, right? So that's kind of more what Freud is saying there. And then as we grow up, that's what it would actually turn into, right? Okay, so that's what's maybe going on during that phallic stage as well. Okay, and then we've got the 4th stage. Now this is from around 6 years old to puberty. And this is the latent stage. Now we know what latent means, we just talked about it. What does latent mean? From dream analysis? The hidden or sort of pushed down part. So during this latent stage, Freud thinks that some of these sort of unconscious sexual issues and desires and conflicts that are coming up get pushed down or sort of put on a back burner, so to speak. And what are kids doing from 6 years old? What do they usually start? School, right? So we're going to school, we're learning social relationships, we're learning interactions, we're learning, right? Education in general. So some of this unconscious desire and things like that gets pushed back, and we learn how to sort of put some of this personality development that we've gone through to use and go out into the world, okay? And then we move forward, we hit puberty, and what happens when you hit puberty? What all comes flooding in?
Emotions. Everything.
More so than emotions, what do we get in puberty? Hormones, right? So as you go through puberty and start to become, sexually mature, we're going to get back into some of those issues, obviously, and desires. So really, for puberty through adulthood, Freud thinks that what we're focused on are adult sexual relationships, which makes sense. He calls this the genital stage. Okay? All right, so as we move forward through these stages, we're developing our id, ego, and superego. So sort of like what we talked about, we said something in the oral stage that was provided to an infant could be something like comfort, security, things like that, right? So if there's an interruption in the oral stage, or maybe the infant switches from nursing to having to use a bottle and formula, or the normal progression of just having to be weaned in general onto food, right? Some infants deal with that okay, and some don't. So an infant that doesn't deal with that well, or for which that can feel traumatic, how might that play out in a personality characteristic later on in life, do you think?
I guess it could mean that like they're not comfortable with change.
Not comfortable with change, yeah. Maybe some mistrust, right, in the world is not the safe, warm place they hoped it was. So some issues there, right? What about if in potty training, the parent or the caregiver is, more punitive, for example, or the child tried really hard, but they had accidents and they got scolded for those, maybe aggressively. What kind of feelings would they have? They really, really tried, but they couldn't do it and they got in trouble. How'd that make you feel? Low self-esteem, right? Makes you feel bad, shameful, things like that, right? So that's what Freud's sort of envisioning happening, and how that develops in our personality shapes later in life. Okay? All right. So that was psychoanalysis. On Friday, we'll move forward into one of the other modern perspectives. Please check your emails. That homework that's in there is due on Friday.
Is there any reading that we need to do?
You can be reading along with chapter 1. It's certainly not going to hurt.